Welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues, and the local personalities with local personalities. I'm Talvi Freed, your local host for the next hour. The mission of the Humboldt County Office of Education is to advocate for the needs of local districts and students, expand learning opportunities for both students and educators, promote student achievement through equitable practices, and support fiscal responsibility across local school districts. Which sounds like a lot, and it is. Joining us tonight is the man in charge of the Humboldt County Office of Education, the Superintendent, Michael Davies-Hughes. Welcome.
Thank you, Talvi. It's good to be here with you.
It is great that you're here. Before we go any further, I do need to acknowledge that, Michael, you are running for re-election, and KZZH is obligated to offer equal time to any and all of the opponents running against you, should there be any. So thus far, we haven't heard of any. But if there are, and you are an opponent like, hey, why is Michael on there and I'm not? Well, contact us, kzzh@accesshumboldt.net, and we'll set something up. During this program, if you're listening live, if you have a question for our guest, feel free to text that question to 707-498-4146. Well, welcome, Michael. Now that we got all the legalese out of the way. Yes, so
Absolutely.
what is your jurisdiction? Because I know there's a lot of schools that are outliers that you're not in control of, or I mean, I don't know
I
if
know
control is
it's
the proper word.
complex. I'll
It is
try
very
to simplify it for you and kind of give you a landscape of what a county superintendent of schools does versus a district superintendent of schools and what a county office does. So maybe we'll start with the county superintendent. So as you mentioned, county superintendents, they're elected positions for 53 of the 58 counties that we have in California. So there are 5 county superintendents that are actually appointed. Some are appointed by the Board of Education, the County Board of Education. And in one case, Los Angeles County Superintendent is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. But the vast majority, 53 of us, are elected officials. And our responsibility, we have statutory functions and responsibilities, is, as you mentioned, Talvi, oversight over the county schools, so the schools that are in the county. And that oversight is primarily around making sure that they're using their resources appropriately. So it's approving their budget. And secondly is to provide oversight for what's called their LCAP, which is their local control and accountability plan, which really, Talvi, is a blueprint for how they're going to use those resources to provide support for students. So that's kind of a brief overview of the statutory functions. There are many more. One of the things that's written in law is that a county superintendent shall superintend the schools in their county. And that's really broad. That's a really broad term. What does it mean to superintend the schools in the county? For me, what that means is that I am regularly checking in with our school district leaders, our superintendents and charter directors. Now, for your listeners and people viewing, you may not know that Humboldt County has about 17,500 students in grades TK through 12. And those 17,500 students are served by 30 different school districts and 15 different charter schools. And that seems like a lot. And honestly, Talvi, when I talk to my colleagues in the other counties in California, they go, wait a second, we have single school districts that have more students than you have in your entire county. And they're served by one district, and you're serving them with 30 districts. What's up? What's going on? Well, I will tell you that one of the reasons for that is that we are so geographically isolated in some of our areas. We're a large county geographically. And if you think about the terrain in Humboldt County, it takes about 3.5 hours driving time to get from one remote school, for example, in Jack Norton Elementary School at the Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District. So in the north, all the way down to a school like Casterlin School in southern Humboldt or Whitethorn School, just because of how mountainous it is, windy the roads are. It really is quite a trek to make it around the schools in Humboldt County. And really, when at the height of the logging industry, every mill had its own single school classroom school district. And that's how many of these single school districts popped up. And they've just remained because of that geographic isolation of those communities. So it's a really fascinating history about schools in Humboldt County. But for my role as the county superintendent is to make sure that the school districts and the charters receive the support that they need to be able to serve students every single day in the best way possible. So my job is really bifurcated. There's two aspects to it. One is to support these school districts and charters within the county, and then the other is to basically run our county office of education. We have about 350, 360 employees in the Humboldt County Office of Education. Many of them work behind the scenes to support these districts and charters, but we also provide direct student services. So we provide services for students in TK through age 23 for students with disabilities. We serve our students who are early learners, so our preschool students, and really everything in between. So we have, and when we offer, like career and technical education classes for some of our charter schools who may not be able to offer those things themselves, but we can offer those things. We have summer programs for students in our different districts and charters so that they can learn about job embedded skills in, for example, health or technology or the trades. So it really is a diverse offering that the Humboldt County Office of Education is able to provide to our students. And honestly, Talvi, that's what makes it so much fun for me, is just the variety of what we can do every day.
So how long have you held this position for in Humboldt County?
So this is about 4.5 years for me. I was first appointed in 2021, November
Okay, I was
2021.
going to say, were you here during the beginning of the pandemic? Um,
Uh, well, I certainly was. I was at a district, so I've served as an administrator in Humboldt County for the past 25 years in a variety of different roles. But my county office position started in November of 2021, finishing out the term of my predecessor, who moved to another position in the state. And then I was elected in June of 2022. So, yeah, that's kind of been my role.
so now you are the superintendent of superintendents, and you mentioned a lot of your job being involving students. I'm
Yeah.
curious, does it also involve the teachers and administrators all across?
Yeah, so going kind of back to structure, I don't have any authority for the day-to-day operations of these 30 districts and the 15 charter schools. They have their own self-governance structure. So they have their own superintendent, or in a charter's case, they're usually called a director of education, and they have their own school board. And so, really, that is the structure for each of these school districts. So, again, my role as the county superintendent is one of oversight, but I don't direct the day to day decision making within the schools, other than our own school programs that we offer. So, court and community school, I didn't mention that earlier. So, students who have been expelled or incarcerated, we're obligated to provide support for them. That runs through the County Office of Education. And then these other programs in supporting students with special education. For example, our Glenn Paul program. Uh, those are our students. who need services from those districts and charter schools. So we have responsibility for the day-to-day for them as well. But yeah, most of the schools in the county and the districts that we serve are kind of self-governed.
So I don't know what the Glen Paul program is.
Sure. So we
Expand.
have yeah, it's a school essentially. So we have several satellites. The main campus is not far from Winship Middle School. So it's out there in the Cutton area. So there's the main Glen Paul campus, and then we have satellite campuses, down in Fortuna, out in Peninsula, and these Glen Paul programs, this Glen Paul School program, supports students with significant disabilities. So we provide some intensive services for those students uh, to make sure that they have every opportunity to be successful, just like their peers in the other schools in the county.
So it's a continuation school, essentially.
No, no, it's not a continuation school. Like I said, we serve students in that program actually from grades TK through age 23. And so those students come to us in a variety of different ages, but they may not have the level of support possible at their regular school because there's such intensive needs. Perhaps they have special equipment that they need. And so we're able to provide that support directly to them, and they'll come to us from the districts. They're referred from the districts to enter into our program. So a continuation school is something different. That's for older students who are credit deficient and who need to be able to, catch up with some of their schooling. So this Glen Paul program is specifically for students with disabilities who have an individualized education plan or an IEP.
Gotcha. So did you start off in administration, or were you a teacher at one point and worked your way up?
I was a teacher for 9.5 years, and then, like I said, I've been an administrator for 25 years, 25 and a half years. I was a seventh grade teacher. I was a fifth grade teacher. I taught elementary physical education, and as far as roles in administration, I've been an assistant principal of a middle school, a principal of an elementary school, an assistant superintendent of a district superintendent, and now, like I said, the county superintendent. So it's been a journey, and every part of that journey has been a privilege, to be honest with you. And this position is no different. And I think what makes it so fascinating, one is the variety of the work that I get to engage in, but also the teams, the people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. It's really, yeah, like I said, it's a privilege and honor to serve. One of the responsibilities that I have too is to advocate for our students at the state and at the national level. So, for example, in a little over 2 weeks, I'll be traveling to Washington, D.C. to meet with members of Congress to advocate for spending funding for education. In April, I'll be meeting with state legislators to advocate for resources and support for our students here in Humboldt County. So, school is not the same. The needs of students are not the same in any one school, and certainly the needs of rural counties like Humboldt is a lot different than the needs down in more urban areas around Sacramento, San Francisco, San Diego, and Los Angeles. So it's important for our legislators, our lawmakers, to hear the voices of rural educators.
When you go into, say, a conference and talk to all the other superintendents of superintendents, do you sit there and go, "Oh, you have no idea what it's like in a rural community"? That they're stuck with, better bus systems, maybe,
Yeah.
being able to take students into places to get on the job trainings that we just, kids dream of that here. And it takes
Yes.
quite a bit to actually get them to see, like, no, you can be an astronaut. We just don't happen to have, a JPL facility here.
Yeah, yeah, good point, Tavi. I think that there is an understanding of some of those challenges, even if it's not a lived experience for some of these county superintendents. But I will say that the majority of counties in California are actually considered rural counties. Most of our students are served in rural environments. Even Los Angeles County, which has, I want to say, about 2.5 million students, they even have these rural schools up in the San Bernardino Mountains for, in eastern LA County, they have small districts. But, often when we think about Los Angeles, we think about LA Unified, right? Los Angeles Unified, which is the second largest school district in the whole nation. But like I said, the majority of students here in California are served in rural districts. So we there we are relatable, and we want to make sure that that voice is amplified because there are less. The student population is obviously less in rural areas. So Humboldt County with 17,500 students, we want to make sure our voice is just as loud in Sacramento as it is for Los Angeles County and the superintendent down there.
What are the issues that students face up here? Even if it, I mean, perhaps they do face that in, Lancaster or something like that. But what are
Yeah.
specifically the hardships students are facing in currently in Humboldt County?
Yeah, and there are several. It's really complex, but I would say that to distill it down, some key things that we have struggled with, which is one of the ones is the one that you mentioned, just access to services. So because of the remote nature, we don't have an easy way to get to us, those service hubs. And so how do we provide those services to students and families when they're living out in Orleans or they're living out down in southern Humboldt? That's a difficulty. That's a challenge for students and families to access those, and whether those are services around healthcare or including mental health, or services around how to meet their housing needs or food insecurities. Those are the kinds of things we have students about 60-70% of our students in Humboldt County are students who are what we call socioeconomically disadvantaged. So they're living in poverty, and poverty certainly brings about its challenges, and that is something that we want to try to address in schools, right? So oftentimes the school is the place where students can access those services that they couldn't otherwise access. And some of those basic needs, honestly, Talvi, like food. So in the state of California, we feed all students. Every student gets a breakfast and a lunch, no matter what the socioeconomic status. So that's just an investment that the state has made to ensure that a basic need of food. Students are not going to be able to learn and focus on learning if they are hungry. Students are not going to be able to focus on learning if they feel unsafe. So we want to make sure that our schools provide this kind of safe environment for students. We talk a lot about, or we hear a lot about equity, and I know that word has been, in some contexts, been weaponized as something that is, what are we doing? Talking, all students should get the same thing. Well, that's not true. Every student needs something different, and we want to make sure that we're providing students what they need, and that's different for every student. And that's, to us as educators, that's what equity is making sure that we're providing everything that the student might need. And honestly, we can't, right? We can't provide everything that they need, but we can provide them with a safe environment, an environment where they're fed, where they feel a sense of belonging, and obviously where they're going to get an education, a free, right, a free education, which is a right and a privilege that we have here in the United States.
So we're going to take a quick break. For those listening, I am talking to Humboldt County Office of Education Superintendent Michael Davies-Hughes, and you're running for for re-election to be the superintendent of superintendents. So we shall be right back with more questions and answers and discussing essentially the future of Humboldt is kind of in your hands here. So some
Oh,
important
no
questions,
pressure.
but yeah, no pressure at all. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I am here with Michael Davies-Hughes, the superintendent of the Humboldt County Office of Education. We just discussed quite a bit. That was quarter of an hour that was full of a lot of information. 17,500 students in Humboldt County around there, 30 school districts, plus charter schools, plus you got 60 to 70% of students living in poverty. Thank goodness for California feeding them, because that was not a thing when I was in school in California
Right.
as a child. And trust me, it affected me greatly. Food insecurity is a real
Yeah.
thing. And so yay, I'm very happy about that. I've been an advocate for feeding. I don't know why you have to be an advocate for feeding children, but back in the
Yeah.
day, there was a huge thing. People really didn't like the idea because, again, the equitable aspect, people don't understand that everyone does need something different. And in order for those who are born into success to truly succeed, you also have to allow others to succeed too. That's called creating a healthy community. So I'm glad you mentioned that. You mentioned something that students need that is a vague term to many, and that is a sense of belonging. What
Yeah.
does the Humboldt County Office of Education do to create a sense of belonging for students of all backgrounds? Because Humboldt County is actually incredibly diverse in many ways. I mean, if you look at the difference between a Southern Humboldt school versus Eureka versus North Coast Preparatory versus one of the charter schools, there's a huge variety of backgrounds here, despite the
Sure.
small number of
Sure.
students.
Yeah. So, what it means to have that sense of belonging for a student, and it's different for every student, but basically, at its foundation, when students walk through the door, they want to feel like that sense that they can be their individual selves without having to uh, be careful about the things that they say or the things that they do, that helps identify themselves. So they have some freedom to have some agency in their learning. They being safe at school. I use that term not only of physical safety but a psychological safety as well. Is that during COVID, one of the things that we knew was an impact of all the students learning remotely. They didn't come to school. They were isolated, right? So they were learning with their teachers from their homes. And you remember that time. In one way, it feels like so long ago, and yet it was only, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Uh, but one of the impacts that we found, one of the artifacts left over from COVID, is that students, especially students who are in those primary grades, that's kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, first grade at that time, is that they missed out on that kind of opportunity for socialization, playing with one another. How do you get along with one another? How do you be a good friend with one another? And we're finding that we're needing to be very explicit about actually teaching those skills. They're not innate skills for students. So we are having not having, we have the opportunity to teach students the ways in which they can have that sense of how to get along with their friends, how to get along with the adults, how to ask questions, how to really advocate for themselves in the classroom. And I'm not just talking about older students; I'm talking about younger students as well. So they have this sense of voice and agency, as I mentioned earlier, and that's what really helps students feel this sense of belonging. Can they relate to other students in the classroom? Regardless of what their background is, what their abilities or disabilities might be, do they feel like they are part of something bigger within their classroom environment, within their school environment? And we have to be explicit on that. You asked about what the HCOE, or the Humboldt County Office of Education, does to support that. Really, it starts with supporting the teachers and the administrators and the support staff that are in the classrooms and at the
You led
school
to my
site.
next question is, do the teachers also get care?
Yeah.
Is that part of something that you offer them? Because there's also a lot of
Oh my
young
gosh. Yeah.
professionals that started college during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I also work in the service industry, and I noticed people forgot how to people over
Mhm.
the pandemic, and it was a
Yeah.
slow coming back into it for many, and also the burden of educating the youth is has to be very heavy. I have several educator friends or people who are involved in either admin or something, and it has been very,
Yeah.
very incredibly stressful for them. Those that have
Yes.
stayed, absolutely impressed. I've known many have switched careers because of the stress of it. And
Yeah.
one thing I hear is that these students are a whole new beast because
Mhm.
that they lack empathy towards others. A lot of people think empathy is an innate feature. Perhaps it is in some, but the studies have shown that it is a learned behavior. So if
Yeah.
they were taught that, the teachers get to deal with it, and they might need a mental health day too. It sounds like.
Uh, Yeah, we certainly know that we need to support teachers in order for them to be able to support students, right? It's like, put your oxygen mask on before helping others. It is the same for teachers. They're humans. And if you think about, all of the things that we as adults have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, we have to take care of ourselves and deal with our own challenges, but also teachers then have to not leave that at the door of the classroom, because you can't leave it, but they need to be able to manage that um, care of self while trying to help students overcome difficulties in their own lives. So it is a heavy burden that teachers have, but it's a profession of passion. The teachers that we have here in Humboldt County, we're really blessed. They're just wonderful um, public servants of students. And one of the ways that we can acknowledge that and support teachers is by providing the tools that they need to be able to be successful in the classroom. Because if you walk into a classroom and you're faced with, some of these behaviors that you're talking about, which we see across the board, um, and you don't have the tools necessary to be successful to address those student behaviors, then you're going to feel like you're being unsuccessful, like that you don't feel that you're doing a good job as a teacher. So, and that's oftentimes why people leave the profession, is that they just, what they thought they were getting into is not what they got into. And that the pressures and the challenges of these behaviors are resulting in teachers feeling like they're not being successful. And you don't want to come to school every day feeling like you are not being successful. So the teachers that stay in the profession, the teachers that we're able to retain in the profession, are the ones that feel supported. They're supported by their peers, they're supported by the administrators, and they're supported, quite frankly, by the parents and the families. And you have to build that community. It's not just a community within the classroom or a community that you build within the school. It really is a community that you build with the school in a greater sense. So that means the families of the students. And so the relationships that teachers and administrators form with families is essential in helping that student feel that they're really being wrapped around by everybody, that everybody's on the same page. Sometimes it's tough to be on the same page with parents and families, but that's our responsibility too, is to make sure that we're reaching out, that there's outreach to parents and families. And I'm not just talking about, the phone call when Johnny's been bad, right? Or the twice a year parent teacher conference. We're talking about more opportunities for teachers and other staff, administrators, to reach out to families, provide them opportunities to engage in what's going on at school in a very strategic and intentional way. So that just doesn't happen by chance. But, we are inviting you for a family fun night or a family math night or a cultural night or whatever it might be, so that families actually feel that they're part of that school community. And it's not just somewhere that you send your child, they get on the bus, they come home at the end of the day, then their hours as parents, and we send them back the next day, and there's siloed responsibilities between school and home. I don't see it that way. I feel like the most success that we find for students is when families and educators are working together in a very intentional way to make sure that students feel supported. And that's I do feel like in Humboldt County, yes, we've got challenges because of our rural environment that we live in, but I do think that our educators do an exceptional job of supporting our students and supporting our families.
So going back to a well-known issue in Humboldt County, the lack of accessibility towards or of service hubs. How does the Office of Education make up for that lack?
Yeah,
There, especially
great question.
educational features. We only have so many museums. They're very small, which is they're wonderful. They're wonderful, though. How does the county make up for that?
Yeah, so one of the things that has come up in the last 3 years is that the state has provided grant funding for what's called community schools. And we think in traditional sense of community schools as being schools for expelled youth, which is true. That's one type of community school, and we offer that through the Humboldt County Office of Education. But the community schools that this grant is supporting is really this opportunity for school to be that hub for families. Because, as I mentioned earlier, school is oftentimes the place where students will come and where parents feel like this is a place where I feel kind of a sense of safety. Not all parents feel that way, but the majority, it is kind of a central hub of a community. A school is, and so the community schools grant has enabled us to provide more support within the schools for things that are not necessarily academic in nature. So I'm talking about mental health support for students, which is a huge need in Humboldt County, across the state. But certainly in Humboldt County, how to address the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students. Also, think about the needs for the wellness, the overall wellness of students. So, funding that can help support, health checks on students. What do students need in terms of taking care of their medical needs? So, some of our schools have used this grant money to develop what's called a wellness center. It's kind of a one-stop shop for students. So they're able to come in, students are able to come in, and they might be able to meet with a counselor, to get some of that mental health support. Or they might meet with a nurse or a social worker. And families can also come in and meet with those service providers at the school. So the school really becomes this community hub, and that's what's meant really in this community schools concept. It is something that is I've seen be very powerful. Where we talked about the sense of belonging earlier, it really does kind of and elevate and support this idea that school is a place where students belong and where families belong, and the direct service that they may have had to travel, you know, an hour and a half away to come to the, Eureka or to Arcata or Fortuna to receive the service is now actually being provided at the school site. So that social worker that you may have had to, come into town is now a school social worker that's working at your child's school. And that's, I think, is a wonderful service that we are able to offer. I do hope that we're able to sustain that, in the long term, because certainly the need is there for students.
So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because we have 5 minutes till our next break. I don't know how it works to which schools pick and choose to close and which schools get to expand. I know there's a school, I think that we in Weot area that is shutting down very
Yeah.
quickly, and then the students are dispersing amongst the already their school systems. And then I heard something about another charter school coming into that area. And how does that work with the Office of Education? Because I feel like that
Yeah,
would be
good
under
question.
your jurisdiction.
Yeah, good question. So yes, there is a school, a charter school, Agnes J. Johnson school, that is actually tomorrow is their last day. It's always hard. It's always sad when a school has to close. One of the issues, and this plays into the reason for the school closure for Agnes J. Johnson, and I'll also speak to another school district that closed last June, which is Greenpoint Elementary School, which is in the kind of the northern central part over 299 between Blue Lake and Willow Creek. They closed their doors because of lack of students. This lack of students or lack of student enrollment, declining enrollment is a real thing here in Humboldt County. So we have, since the mid 90s, we have less students that are coming to our schools. This is a statewide phenomenon. There are some counties where there is some increase in enrollment, but in Humboldt County, certainly, we've been on this steady decline in the number of students that we have. And the impact of that is that we're funded primarily in schools, in public schools in California. We're funded based on ADA, or average daily attendance, which really means butts in seats. So if you have less students coming to your school, you are going to get less money. And when you have all these, these 30 school districts, 15 charter schools, and they already are small, right? With some of them, like we've got 6 school districts in Humboldt County that have less than 50 students. As small as 6. We have a school with 6 students, 10 students, 15 students. Well, if you lose a family, if a family leaves, that could be half your students leaving, and you're losing that revenue. And so at some point it becomes unsustainable. You become fiscally insolvent and you have to close. This was the case for Agnes J. Johnson. They were expecting a certain enrollment. That enrollment did not come in, and they lost students, and therefore they lost revenue, and they weren't able to sustain the programs that they have. And unfortunately, they've had to close, mid-year, which is especially difficult, right? Because you have students changing schools in the middle of the year,
Sounds a
which is
little
not
wild.
ideal. But yeah. I mean, all those students will have a place to go, and the majority of them live in the Southern Humboldt Unified School District, and so that district is responsible for those students coming into their schools, and so they'll accommodate them. But it is difficult in the middle of the year to have students move. And then in the case of Greenpoint Elementary that I mentioned, they lapsed A lapsation is a specific type of closure. So when you have less than 6 ADA or 6 or less ADA, so average daily attendance of 6 students, then education code or the law requires that school to close. And you can apply for a waiver, and Greenpoint Elementary School has applied for waivers in the past. But the waiver is granted if there's a chance that there are going to be more students moving in later. Maybe there's some preschool age students who haven't quite come of school age yet, and so they'll stay open. But in the case of Greenpoint Elementary, there were no new students coming in, and so that school district, it's a one school district, they had to close. And what happens is that those students then, the whole school is lapsed into another district. So in this case, the Greenpoint Elementary School district was lapsed or absorbed into or annexed into Blue Lake Elementary. So now Blue Lake Elementary's school district boundaries now encompass that which used to be Greenpoint as well. And they'd been open for over 100 years, that school. And at one point, I think they had pretty close to 50 students, and they had to close school. They had 3 students when they closed in June. So I think it's indicative of just the way things are in Humboldt County. In our rural nature, we have less young families who are establishing roots in Humboldt County, and therefore we have less students in our schools, and that
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 there's
has an
also
impact.
people just aren't having as many kids or any kids.
Yep,
So
yep. The birth rate is lower.
we will get back to the topic of the Humboldt County Office of Education with Michael Davies-Hughes, who is running for re-election as the superintendent of superintendents and the Humboldt County.
Well, the official title, just to let you know, the official title is Humboldt County Superintendent of Schools.
Humboldt County Superintendent of Schools.
Yes, that's correct.
Very impressive. I was a little nervous because I was like, principals are one thing, superintendents, you're like, all I can think of is Superintendent Chalmers coming in and being like, Seymour. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm here with Michael Davies-Hughes, who is the superintendent of Humboldt County Superintendent of Schools. Yes.
You got it, Talvi.
I got it. I will never get it right again. We have been discussing quite a bit. If you have questions for Michael, then please text us at 707-498-4146. You have about 10 minutes to get those questions in if you would like to. Yes, text, not call, for reasons. So we have discussed a lot. I want to ask, what happens to the teachers of closed schools and the administrators of closed schools.
Yeah.
Sadly, we don't have time, so I'm just going to go, they get absorbed by other schools or they find a different job. That's what happens. In long and short of it, I want to go into more intricacies, though there's much more going on, because while we are not growing the younger population is not growing, and that's happening all around the country. Well, at least in California, which, reasons. We won't get into reasons for that, though there are some expansions happening within the Humboldt County school districts. And that is, there's the old CVS on Myrtle is being acquisitioned by the Humboldt County Office of Education. And What's going on there?
Yeah, we feel very fortunate actually that this property we were able to buy this property. We currently have two satellite office spaces that we currently lease. One is on H Street in Eureka, the other is on E Street in Eureka, and we've been leasing those for a couple 3 years while we've been looking for another site for us to purchase because we have grown. And the reason we've grown, and people have asked, well, if you have less students to serve, why are you as a county office growing? One of the reasons is that there are economies of scale. So if you have all these small school districts, they may not have the capacity to be able to do things like um, offer business services for their school district. You know, there's a business side of running a school district, or they may not be able to have um, a psychologist or a nurse for their own school district because they're just too small. And so what we do is, as a county office, is that we leverage our uh, resources to be able to provide those services to multiple different school districts. So, you know, we provide business services for school districts. We provide psychologist services. We have a social worker wellness team. Um, we have counselors that support school districts. We have occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists. So even though we have, as a county, less students, we still need to be able to provide those services for the students that need that help. The other thing that's happening is that the state is requiring county offices to provide more services to school districts just by legislature by legislation. So we're actually required to do more to support schools, especially schools that are struggling. Maybe they have some academic indicators, certain groups of students, certain demographic groups of students that may be struggling. As a county office, we are required to provide a level of support for those schools so that they, in turn, can provide improved education for their students. And that might look like coaching, right? It might look like a team from the Humboldt County Office of Education going in and actually providing professional development and coaching for the teachers so that they are able to support their students further. So, long and the short of it there, it was kind of a long-winded answer to your question. But so the CVS facility is going to be converted into office spaces where we're going to absorb the staff that we have from those two satellite office spaces, because we're paying about $20,000 a month in rent payments. We're not building any equity, so we're going to use those funds to be able to apply towards something that we can have for a very long time, into the future. And so the CVS facility will enable us to do that. The other thing that it does is our main site, it's very close to our main site. Our main site is just across the street. And it was an old school, so Franklin Elementary School. It's called the Franklin Campus. It used to be part of Eureka City Schools. It's an old elementary school, and it is approved by the Department of State Architects, so it's DSA, to have student programs in them. And so there's an extra level of scrutiny when you are, and understandably so, if you're housing students or serving students in a building and they have to meet a higher code than a building that doesn't serve students. And because the Franklin site is already has that designation, we can move some of the adult only kind of business side, administration side of the Humboldt County Office of Education over to the CVS, the previous CVS site, while opening up some more spaces to serve students at the Franklin site. And we already are serving students over at the Franklin site. We have a couple of preschool programs, Redwood Learners, that are already there. I'd mentioned the career and technical education classes that we have serving some of the charters. we're going to be able to expand those because we can use that space at the Franklin. We can free up some of those offices into classroom spaces, and then move the non-student facing programs and the kind of the infrastructure part, the business side of the Humboldt County Office of Education into the CVS building. And we're thinking, Talvi, at this point, we're working with the architect right now on what that looks like, what the layout's going to be. But it's very on our hopeful, optimistic side. We'd be looking to move in sometime in probably the fall or the winter of 2027. Right now, it's just a big box. It's 25,500 square feet of an empty box. And so, we get to vision out what that looks like. The other thing that we feel fortunate about is that it comes with parking, and there are about 100 parking spaces that belong to that particular parcel. And if you know anything about parking in Eureka, it is tough. It is tough. And so to be able to have a building that has parking along with it for our staff and for guests that come to patrons that come to the county office. We have the school districts that come and they pick up their payroll. They come, they because we do all the credentialing services, retirement services. There's a lot of people that come to the county office for service, and so it's important that they have a place where they can park. And so this building provides that opportunity as well. So yeah, we feel fortunate, and honestly, we think it's fiscally responsible for us to invest in a place that we can purchase, as opposed to, just giving money each month to another entity
You have
for
made it
rent.
sound very, very logical. I have one more question before we get into the round robin, which it's just you're just the robin today. So before
Okay.
that, there has been a lot of research on the detriments of technology being introduced into the classrooms, that those who have had iPads since kindergarten are scoring lower than ever before in American history, which that comes with a grain of salt with how testing is done and everything. So I was the kindergarten class that was like, you are the first kindergarten class with access to computers, which I had a computer at home, but still, we had
Okay.
a full computer lab. And so I'm curious, because it used to be give every student an iPad, then they'll be successful in life. And now it is, if you give a student an iPad, they'll throw it at the teacher and then cry because they want it back to play Angry Birds. So what is happening on the tech front with
Yeah.
students and the potential of that tech causing an aggravation in their mental health and ability to adult in the future?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There's not really a clean answer to that issue. I will say that I am a proponent of the use of responsible use of technology, because I think there's some inevitability there. We have to prepare students for for careers that don't even exist right now. How do you do that? And we do know that with the advancement, the incredible advancement of technology, including AI, that we can't say, well, you know what, technology messes with your brain, and so we're just not going to use it at school, right? We're not going to encourage students to use it, and when you graduate, good luck, right? Because the world out there is absolutely surrounded by technology. But that would be irresponsible of us to do that. So, what does it mean to make sure that students have that we are responsible, or providing students with that responsible use of technology? Let me tell you some things that have changed, Talvi. There's a recognition that being having your smartphone and having this kind of visual stimulation constantly uh, can be detrimental to the brain, right? Because students, how can you focus if you have sound bites or clicks or things that only last, 30 seconds and we're on to the next thing? When we're expecting students to be in classroom for, 50-minute periods, and in elementary school, one classroom, for the entire day. It rewires the brain. So what we're finding is that, and this is actually a state law that has come out recently last year, that requires school districts to put limits on the availability and the use of cell phones or smartphones at school. And I'll give you an example that our high schools in Humboldt County already have board policies and administrative regulations that prohibit the use of cell phones by students during class time. And actually for some even in passing periods, like in the hallways. And what I'm hearing from principals, from teachers, is that students are talking to one another in ways and interacting with one another in ways that they had not in recent years, because everything was done. I mean, even if you were in the same room, and
Yes.
you could walk, you see that right now, and you probably have seen it if you're walking
Oh,
into a
absolutely.
Starbucks or if you're walking into a store,
Yeah.
that people in the same room are communicating with one another through their smartphone rather than actually having a conversation. So, those things are being limited in schools. And what we are finding is that students are spending more time, quality time with one another. And that is definitely, on the positive side of things. However, like I mentioned earlier, we do need to make sure that students have access to the responsible use of technology, because, I mean, it does surround us. And when we're thinking about, what does that look like for a student, if they're researching or they're preparing for a presentation for their class, why would we limit their access to be able to do that research using technology or be able to use the tools that can help them with that presentation? But it is more around kind of what is common sense around the use of technology. And the reality is that it's changing so fast that we may not necessarily, as educators, be able to stay ahead of the curve, so to speak, for students, but at least we can teach them how to go about being discerning in the use of technology. Just because they read something from a Google search does not make it fact, right? And so, part
AI.
of it is teaching students how to be critical thinkers, how to be responsible thinkers, and how to problem solve, and by digging a little deeper, because you can't take the first hit that comes up from Google, and whatever article that is being the truth. So we're encouraging students and helping students kind of navigate this ever-changing, constantly evolving technology world to really be discerning about, let's dig a little deeper here. Let's make decisions and have opinions based on multiple perspectives, not just the first thing that comes up.
So I saved that question for the end specifically because I'm aware that technology, youth, even adults can be an entire show. And now we are at the round robin where you're just the robin. You have about a minute and a half, 2 minutes
Okay.
to talk to. You're not talking to me now. You're talking directly to the people listening on KZZH 96.7 FM, or who are watching on one of our Access Humboldt stations or on YouTube. And you can tell them whatever you want. I've had people say some very interesting things. It is your time. So about minute, so 45 seconds. Go.
I would encourage our listeners or viewers to take the time to, if you are a parent or a grandparent of a child, just take some time to be in their company. Listen to what their needs might be, what their concerns might be. Honestly, the thing that children need more than anything else is time and attention from the adults. And so I would just encourage our families to take that time and, invest in the future, which is our students. As I mentioned earlier, we have wonderful schools, wonderful teachers and educators in Humboldt County. I would encourage you, if you're a parent or a grandparent or a guardian of a student, take the time to have conversations with those educators to really understand what is going on in the schools. And to the extent possible, be supportive. And that support doesn't mean you have to volunteer in the classroom. There are different ways in which you can support the school. So just reach out to the school, take the time to be in the company of your child without the distractions. And lastly, I would say, Talvi, read. Read with your child, have your child read to you. Try to spend some time in literature.
I love that. Thank you, Michael Davies-Hughes, the Humboldt County Superintendent of Schools. I appreciate you being on the show. That is all the time we have. Again, thank you for being on Thursday Night Talk. For those
My
listening,
pleasure.
watching on YouTube or on one of our access channels, or listening on 96.7 FM KZZH. Feel free to email us if you have a topic or a suggestion for, or even you're angry and you're like, you know what, that Davies-Hughes superintendent is silly. Feel free to email us at kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. And we do replay the show Friday evenings at 8 p.m. You can watch the show on YouTube. Feel free to find us on social medias, Facebook, accesshumboldt.net. Send us messages. We love it sometimes. Have a great night. I'm Talvi Fried, your local host, and I'll see you next week with another Thursday Night Talk.